Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Today, you called the CEOs of Reddit, Discord, Steam, and Twitch before the committee. What do you want to hear? And what role, if any, do you believe these four platforms play in elevating or giving visibility to rhetoric that leads to or inspires violence?
We don't know that they are part of the problem, but we have a lot of questions. And several members of the Oversight Committee who are a lot more knowledgeable about those platforms than I was prior to the Charlie Kirk assassination. They've expressed concern that they would like to question them. There seems to be a pattern emerging from that's the form of communication of choice by some of the crimes, the high-profile crimes that have been committed lately, especially by the younger perpetrators. So we have a lot of questions about that, and hopefully sometimes, it's not, we don't have these hearings necessarily to grill or embarrass the witness, but maybe to find solutions to the problems, because there are a lot of people that are concerned that this pattern may be because of some form of business model that they may have.
Meaning, if I understand you correctly, Mr. Chairman, some of your committee members fear or have come to believe that communications on these platforms feel to a younger cohort in our country less visible, and so they're more comfortable discussing things that they are maybe contemplating?
Well, again, the pattern that this source of communication, this form of communication was used by in at least 3 of the last 4 high-profile crimes. And there are members that have concerns that there could be, some type of behavior that could be either detected prior. I don't know how that would work, but they have some specific questions. And then as far as, is there a reason that these criminals have started using that platform? Is there some type of, marketing or some type of lure that lures them in and maybe brings people together that communicate that may not be planning things in the best interest of the American people?
Mm-hmm. Does this in any way feel to you like inquiring about the potential policing of speech on these platforms?
Well, that's been a concern of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committee for a long time. So that's why I'm trying to be careful in answering the questions. And we don't want to do anything to limit speech, but there are questions as to this is a relatively new platform, at least for people my age. And secondly, is there something that Congress can do? Are there warning signs that were there that we need to be?
Or maybe something the platforms can do.
Could be. And those are the questions we want to ask. But there again is a concern on my part, and probably a majority of the members of the committee on both parties about restriction of speech of any type.
This is a hard question, but I want to put it to you. Do you personally have a definition of speech that to your mind incentivizes, encourages, or promotes violence that would elicit a governmental response to suppress?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a limit, but I don't know what that would be. I mean, it's just like we all agree that child pornography is not free speech.
Correct.
There are limits to speech, but those would have to be a big bar, because I believe very strongly in the freedom of speech and in the entire First Amendment.
Right. So you don't have one for yourself at this moment?
No.
Okay,
no,
got it.
No. And look, we're getting calls from a lot of people, and that's what we do as members of Congress, where their representatives, people call their congressman or email their congressman and about concerns. And there are a lot of people that have concerns about these platforms, or concerns about their safety.
A lot of people are hurting after Charlie Kirk's
lot of people are
assassination,
hurting
and they want you to do something.
Yes, they want us to do something. We don't know what to do, and usually when Congress does something, the intentions are good, but then there are things called unintended consequences and things like that happen. So we're taking the initial steps. I'm sure there are going to be other committees that are going to have some thoughts on this. I know the Homeland Security Committee has some questions too, and they're planning some type of hearing or investigation as well.
Does the committee broadly, Mr. Chairman, have any inquiries planned around Charlie Kirk's assassination?
No, not at this time. No, we trust the local law enforcement and the FBI thus far. If something ever arose where there would be, lots of questions, then that's a possibility. But right now, at this moment, there's no plan to do anything along those lines.
Several administration officials have discussed crackdowns on what they have described in public. This includes the Vice President, J.D. Vance, leftist groups or non-governmental organizations that they contend do things to foment violence in our country of a political nature. Is the committee going to be involved in inquiries along those lines?
I don't know. It's been announced that the Department of Justice is looking into something along those lines. I know that there are several people, including Chip Roy, that have written a letter asking Speaker Johnson to form a select committee on that. But there's not been anything from our committee standpoint or from the leadership standpoint that's directed us on the Oversight Committee to do any.
Do you share those concerns, and might you organize the committee in that direction?
Well, we know that there's a lot of funding of these indivisible groups. You know, there are a lot of liberal groups. Four of the last 6 public events I had protesters outside, and they were part of an indivisible group that's a subsidiary of a Soros-funded group. And you know, there's concern, I guess, among some. I'm not that worried about the protesters or the organized things, but you know, after the Kirk assassination, there's some members that feel, you know, are there some of these left-wing groups trying to get members to go to things outside in public where they can be sitting ducks and things like that. I don't think that, but there are always.
You don't think that?
I don't think that, but I do think that there are a lot of NGOs that are being funded by left-wing groups that are creating havoc. I mean, they're trying to disrupt meetings. The protesters at my meeting in Paducah, Kentucky, when they left, or when the crowd left, they were getting up in their face and things like that. So that's not. You know, that crosses the line of free speech.
Meaning it becomes physical confrontation. But as a baseline threshold matter, protest in this country, however it's funded, protected by the First Amendment, protected by the Oversight Committee, respected as a form of political communication in this country.
It is, as long as there's no violence.
As long as there's no violence. That's an absolute benchmark for you in the committee.
Sure.
Okay. You remember as well as I do, Mr. Chairman, and I think you were alluding to this before, that during COVID, there were libertarians and conservatives who felt they had either been deplatformed or somehow penalized in their free speech. And this committee and many Republicans in Congress rose considerable voices of alarm about that. Do you fear that there's anything that could tip over in that direction in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk?
Well, you always have checks and balances in the system. There'll be layers of oversight. Again, we have a system full of checks and balances, especially in this town. So I hope not, is my answer to your question. And I'm sure, you know, we've got plenty of Republicans that are adamant. If they see another Republican cross the line on a constitutional right, I think they'll speak up. And, you know, but I will say this, you have instances, and I'm changing this up just a hair, of where we feel that the Justice Cabinet, for instance, was weaponized. And some other government agencies were weaponized against conservatives. And I think you've got some investigations now by the administration. You've got some investigation in Congress. I think some in the media have said, oh, that's retribution. It's not retribution. I think sometimes sometimes the media looks at conservatives a lot closer than they look at liberals with respect to violations of civil rights or free speech or constitutional rights.
You don't regard it as retribution, these investigations?
No.
What word would you use?
What would what?
What word would you use to describe them
Well,
that counters the idea that it's retribution?
We're all looking for accountability. We're looking, for fairness. We want everything to be fair and balanced. So I think that's the word that I would use.
Okay. The reason I asked about free speech is because yesterday the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, said, or was a podcast utterance was put across the media in which she said, hate speech will be prosecuted. And there was tremendous blowback among conservatives saying that's not permissible in this country. Were you alarmed by those remarks?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes people say things and they don't come out the way they mean. Sometimes the media is taking them out of context. I think Pam Bondi, certainly it's a fair question to ask her what she meant by that. But I do think that there's a concern about the increased political temperature in America and the result being more violence. Many of us believe that the majority of the last several mass shootings and high-profile crimes have been committed by people that are more on the liberal end of this political spectrum than conservatives. Now, some of the media would disagree with that, but I'm pretty confident, and I'm saying that. I'm not just blaming the left. Both parties, both sides can share blame for increased political rhetoric. But at the end of the day, I think...
And there are victims on both sides.
There are victims on both sides.
Minnesota
there are bad actors on
legislatures,
both sides.
Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, Speaker Pelosi's husband. I mean, there are victims on both sides.
Of course.
You acknowledge that?
Yeah, I do acknowledge that.
Okay.
I do.
But it is true that hate speech is not prosecutable in this country. It's protected by the First Amendment, repugnant though it may be. You believe that?
I do. I would assume that Pam Bondi believes that hate speech that is directed towards an end goal of violence or criminal behavior would be prosecuted. That's what I would assume she would mean by that, but you would have to ask her that.
Let me turn your attention, Mr. Chairman, to the Epstein matter. The FBI director yesterday testified before the Senate that Jeffrey Epstein was not an FBI informant. That's what he said in open testimony. Based on the committee's knowledge of this matter, do you agree with that?
Well, we haven't seen anything that would lead us to believe that he was an informant, but we haven't received all the information yet. We're still going over every bit. We've looked at probably 38 or 39,000 pages of documents thus far. So we expect to get some more, and we'll keep looking. But I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe that.
Okay, and I'm not trying to play gotcha here. It is an open question, but you don't expect to find any information that would confirm that he was an FBI informant.
Well, I don't know I have no expectations on what to find.
One way or the other.
Right.
Okay. How about this? Do you have any reason, or does the committee have any reason to believe he was an asset of a foreign intelligence service, not the FBI or the United States?
We haven't seen any evidence that would suggest that he was. There were always rumors and questions about what was going on in Epstein Island. Was the government involved? Was Epstein an agent? Was he working with agents? Was he a spy? Were we spying on other countries? These are the questions that the media is asking, questions that Republicans
Does the committee regard them as important and relevant questions?
Yeah, I think they do. Mm-hmm.
Because?
Well, the reason so many people are interested in the Epstein issue is they want to know, first of all, who all, if any, were involved in the human trafficking of those girls, because the rumors are they're high-profile people and high-profile names. We haven't seen anything yet that would, suggest who any of those people were, if there were any of those people. We know Epstein committed horrible crimes. We know Maxwell committed horrible crimes. We've met with some of the victims, and we're trying to, accumulate a list if there's not a list. I think that's what the first question. People want to know who, if any, were the men that were going over there and abusing the girls. And secondly, they want to know...
At the island, or maybe in
New
York?
Or anywhere. Island,
or somewhere
New York,
in Florida?
Florida, anywhere.
Any of those are possibilities?
Any of those. And then they want to know, was the government involved? Were we spying? Was he an agent? Did the government turn a blind eye to what was happening for the girls because they were using him as a spy or an agent, or to get collateral on foreign actors? Those are the questions that we have. Those are questions that the media has and the American people have, and we're trying to get answers to that.
Do you think you'll be able to get answers
Yeah,
to those questions?
I do. I do.
You feel confident about that?
Yeah.
Is there a timeline you're confident
Well,
expressing?
I would love to give you a quick timeline, but these congressional investigations never go as quickly as they should.
Mm-hmm. On Capitol Hill today, Jamie Dimon, head of J.P. Morgan, told reporters the following, and I want to quote him directly. The government knew about his crimes, meaning Epstein's crimes, way before everybody else. So they knew and should have closed it down way before. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
I think that's very possible. And if Jamie Dimon said that, that would mean that J.P. Morgan put exactly word for word what he said in things that are called suspicious activity reports. These are bank violations that I used during the Biden investigation.
I remember you and I had a long conversation about that.
So banks file those with the government. So if he's saying that, and he's a very smart person, I would say that J.P. Morgan filed some suspicious activity reports many, many years ago. We think that this has dated back to 1996. That's 6 presidential administrations that apparently had information that there was human trafficking being involved on Epstein Island. Now, one of the things that I've requested, and Treasury has said yes, but we haven't gone in and we're trying to get the date, and hopefully it'll be, if not the end of this week, next week, where my staff can start going in and reading those suspicious activity reports. So if Jamie Dimon said that, that makes me feel even more confident that those bank violations will give us information not just of whether or not the banks reported this activity, but also who was wiring money to Epstein. Were people paying money? If they were purchasing girls and things like that, we will be able to trace
Senator Ron
that.
Wyden, ranking Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee, has said there are records that indicate that can reveal.
Because I asked, they know that because I asked in a letter, and the Treasury responded back, yes, there were records. So, that's the thing that's frustrating about this whole Epstein. Everybody would need to do the Massey discharge petition. The Oversight Committee is way ahead of what the Massey discharge petition. The Massey discharge petition doesn't say anything about subpoenaing the estate. We subpoenaed the estate. That's where you got all that trove of information last week that included the birthday card and all the other stuff that people made. We did that. We asked for the bank violations. So all this information that's coming out today is because we've asked if there were bank violations, and we got an answer back, yes. Then we asked Treasury, can we go in and look at them? And they said yes. So the Trump administration is cooperating with our investigation. I think we're a lot further along than people realize.
We'll get to the discharge petition in a moment, Mr. Chairman, but for those who are trying to follow this, want to understand what you're conveying about the suspicious reports, what might that help you, the committee, and the country piece together?
Well, with the suspicious activity reports, it'll say exactly what year that financial institutions suspected that Epstein was human trafficking. Okay. It will also help us trace the money as to who was wiring money to Epstein, to where we can figure out what was this $250,000 wire for, what was this $100,000 wire for. It's a lot of tracing, and it's like a crime scene, and that's what our committee rooms will be looking like, and we're just going to follow the money. And that was one of the things the victims' attorneys asked us to do when I said, what can we do to help? In a 2.5-hour meeting with 4 or 5 Epstein victims and their attorneys, they said, follow the money, do like what you did in the Biden investigation. And that started with those bank violations. And that's, if Morgan said that today, I hadn't heard he said that, then that's a good sign that there's something there.
And so your pledge to the American people is you're going to follow the money.
Absolutely.
Wherever it leads.
Wherever it leads.
And do you believe that in the process of following the money, there might be activity that could become criminally prosecutable?
I don't know. I would assume, but I don't know that for sure.
Reason I ask is, you well remember, Mr. Chairman, when the FBI and the Justice Department put out its 2-page memo, it said, we don't believe there's any reason to pursue any other individuals for prosecution. And that alarmed survivors and victims, saying, wait a minute, there had to be other people involved. So this is one of the things you're trying to bring to the surface.
Right. Well, one of the things that we've tried to do in meeting with the victims and their attorneys is give us names of people that you suspect were involved, and we'll try to follow
is there anything you can say about that part of it?
No, not
Names?
really. Okay.
Okay. But they have been helpful, and you're trying to be responsive.
They've been helpful in some areas and not as helpful as I would like in others.
Can you go on with that?
We're just trying to get names of people that we can look into, but we're following the money as well. So,
based on what you have developed so far, what would be your level of comfort or discomfort with the President of the United States considering any form of leniency for Ghislaine Maxwell?
I would encourage the president not to, based on what we've seen thus far. From what we've seen thus far, I can feel pretty confident saying to the American people that Epstein and Maxwell were bad people. And, obviously Epstein's gone, but with respect to Maxwell, I would not prefer that she get a pardon or a commutation.
Okay. Was there anything you learned from her conversation with the Deputy Attorney General?
No, a few things, but nothing that we didn't already suspect.
And wasn't already part of the confirmed record. And in some cases, she sort of glossed over things that were less favorable to her that were in the record. You'd agree with that characterization?
Possibly, yeah.
FBI Director Patel told the Senate yesterday in open committee testimony that the original sin, his word, original sin of the Epstein case was Alex Acosta's plea agreement with Epstein. First of all, do you agree with that?
It looks like that could be true, and Acosta's coming in for a transcribed interview next week.
He is.
Yes.
What do you want to know from him?
A lot. Why did Epstein get what appears to be a sweetheart deal? Give us a timeline of events and how you concluded that his sentence shouldn't have been what it was.
Which was not only lenient, but
just virtually nothing.
Virtually nothing, and he was allowed to sort of do things that no one convicted of or who had pled to a
Had
crime
an
of that
ankle bracelet,
kind could have been able to do. I mean, he was continuing to do his operations.
Right. That's what it appears.
That's what it appears to you. It's a fair reading.
It appears that way.
And that'll be under oath.
Oh, yeah. Well, if it's a transcribed, I can't remember if he's coming in voluntarily or not, but if he lies to Congress, that's a felony. So he's either lying. If he says something that's not true, the crime is a felony. He either lies to Congress or he's perjured himself. Either way, it's a criminal referral.
Very serious matter.
Very serious matter.
This conversation you're going to have with Alex.
Yeah, and look, it's Republican and Democrat, so we'll get an hour, and the Democrats will get an hour, and I don't think that they'll be any harder on Mr. Acosta than we will. We have a lot of questions.
What is your general reaction, Mr. Chairman, to what you were told in the conversations the committee had with Bill Barr, Alberto Gonzales, and Jeff Sessions? They all seem to have very little memory of conversations, interactions, or anything about this case. Are you satisfied or dissatisfied?
Yeah, I am. But we interviewed.
You're satisfied.
I am. We interviewed 6 different attorneys general. The first few testified that they had no knowledge that would benefit the committee in whatsoever form. And you think about it, there wasn't, and those were Republican and Democrat attorney generals. There wasn't a lot in the news about Epstein during their tenure. You get to Barr, and then it started increasing because that's when he was prosecuted. That's when the story first broke. But I think Barr is a very good man, and he was, came in and was the first person to reply, to cooperate, and he was fully cooperative. And I think what he said is absolutely right. I mean, I think that the only thing that I might, question, and I don't know enough yet to make determination, we're still investigating, was the death of Epstein, was that a suicide or not? I don't think you can tell from the video that we released, but, we may not ever be able to determine that. But as far as with the investigation, I think that, he had reviewed enough to know if there were, some of these big, crazy accusations that are floating around out there were true. And he answered a lot of the Democrats had a lot of questions with respect to.
So you considered his testimony before the committee truthful and
absolutely
valuable? Yeah,
very valuable.
You just mentioned suicide. Have you, Mr. Chairman, reached a conclusion about what happened to Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell. The video, it doesn't show inside the cell room. It just shows around the cell, and there was a lot of activity, before and after. He committed suicide, but it's one of those things that may be hard to ever conclude one way or the other. But the Attorney General said he was confident that it was suicide.
I want to be careful here because people will listen very carefully to your answer. So my question directly is, you are not sure whether he committed suicide?
I don't think anybody's sure. Nobody's sure. I mean, the
He
video
could have been
doesn't zero in on it, and there were no witnesses.
In other words, he could have been murdered.
Well, there's a lot of things that could have happened. I'm not going to say that it was murder or anything. It could have been suicide, but there were no witnesses, and it's not on the video. So that's that's what we're working with there.
Or not able to work with.
Right.
Okay. How would you describe the level of cooperation the committee has received so far from the Epstein estate? You mentioned documents a moment ago. There are some who believe that Epstein estate possesses much more, and they have only given you a fraction of what they possess. What is your assessment?
According to the estate, they've given us all the documents. So we've asked, for any other.
Do you believe that to be true?
That's what they tell me. I have no reason not to believe them.
Okay.
They haven't done anything to make me not believe them. They didn't give us any trouble when we requested the documents. They could have taken it to court, I guess. We would have won eventually, but they didn't they didn't do that.
When the president describes this entire matter as a Democratic hoax, do you agree or disagree with
I
that?
think what the president means when he says it's a Democrat hoax is that the Democrats are trying to imply that he has some type of criminal liability or that he is covering up anything pertaining to the Epstein. And that's not the case. And it is not the case. I mean, the president has cooperated with us. They're turning over the documents. They've turned over, a significant number of documents already. And I think that, with some of the stuff that everybody wants that's not gotten, some of the interviews are sealed. Pam Bondi has asked the judge to unseal them because we asked her to do that. And the judge rejected, but I think we'll eventually get that. And that's a pretty big amount of potential evidence right there, the transcripts from the interviews of Epstein and some of the victims.
Would you say it was mishandled when the 2-page memo came out saying there's no reason to have further prosecutions? He committed suicide and the matter's closed?
I don't, the challenge.
Because clearly the matter's not closed.
Well, it doesn't matter what the oversight committee. I mean, the internal investigation would open or close it. We go back and we review things. The challenge we have is, again, there's no witnesses, and the video is not, zeroed in on his cell. It's just outside the cell.
No,
so
but I mean the larger
his
case itself, where the Justice Department basically said there's nothing here to look at. Was that mishandled?
I can say, it's very possible. It's very possible. I don't think that some of the most salacious stuff that we've been hearing is going to surface in the documents. I don't know if it didn't happen. I don't know if it did happen and people have covered their tracks. I don't know, but the documents that are coming in, the interviews that we've had with some of the victims, we're trying to get some names and accumulate a list. Even if there was no list, say, okay, well, this person was there, this person was there, this person was there. According to this victim, this person violated her.
And back to where we were a few minutes ago, the following the money is going to be where a lot of this is going to be explained.
And that's what the attorneys for the victims asked us to do, follow the money.
You mentioned the discharge petition a moment ago. You believe it's not necessary?
No.
Explain to me why.
Well, first of all, we're way ahead of what the discharge petition asks the administration to turn over documents. We've gotten a huge ton of documents thus far, but then we went further. We've asked attorneys general to come in for depositions. We've heard from Bill Barr, and we're getting letters from the other attorney general as we speak, explaining their limited knowledge of the case due to it wasn't in the news, or it didn't rise to their, to the level of the AG at that particular moment in time. And then we've asked for the bank records, which is, I think, going to be as important as anything. So if the discharge petition passed the House, if they got enough signatures on it, it passed the House, it's got to pass the Senate. Okay? Who knows what's going to happen there. The Senate doesn't get in any big hurry. So we can sit around with our hands in our pockets and wait for that, or we can do what we've done. We've already we're already set up to, we've already interviewed one former attorney general. We've already gotten about, close to 40,000 pages of documents. Mm-hmm. We've got, the estate evidence rolling in. So I think that we're way ahead of that discharge petition. I think the media keeps covering it because if it passed, the narrative would be that was an embarrassment for Trump or whatever, because the discharge petition is a tool for the minority. And,
right, of course.
It's
Always
really,
has been.
Anytime it's ever been used successfully in history, which is very few
Very
times,
rare, yeah.
It's been a huge embarrassment on the leadership.
It's a bloody nose for the leadership, right?
Yeah.
Which is in itself a story, but from your vantage point, it's not important in the story of trying to get to the bottom of this.
Right. And I think we're trying a lot harder. We had that 2.5-hour meeting with the victims and their attorneys, private. We didn't the one that Massey and Ro Khanna had on the steps of the Capitol with the TV and all that was fine. But we wanted to meet privately, and it was Republicans and Democrats on the committee. and our staffs met with them and listened to them. It was very little talking. Most committee meetings, the members of Congress do 90% of the talking and everybody else does 10%. This was the victims and their attorneys did 90% of the talking and Congress did 10%, and it was asking questions mainly. So we're sincerely trying, when we subpoena information, they make 2 copies. They make a copy for the Republicans and the Democrats. That's always been the rule, always been the rule. So the Democrats aren't getting anything less than what we get. So we're doing a lot more than the discharge petition, but yet the Democrats are still trying to, make the American people think, oh, the Republicans don't want to vote for this discharge petition because they don't want transparency. I can assure you the Republicans in the House of Representatives want transparency. The people have said something to them back home, asked a lot of questions, and the Republicans are committed to getting answers to the American people.
What was your emotional reaction, Mr. Chairman, to that meeting you just described with the survivors and their attorneys?
Yeah, it was just tough to listen to, especially when they said how old they were, and
Very young.
very young,
Totally exploitable. They were exploited.
Yeah, they were exploited.
Lured in.
They were lured in, and it looks like
under false pretenses.
under false pretenses,
And then violated.
And many of them, most of them were from foreign countries, and it's just hard to listen to. And there were a lot of the female members of Congress that were, really, I think, taking it harder than anybody else. Nobody was comfortable listening to what they were saying. It was just hard to listen to, and it made everybody determined to try to seek justice for the victims. If the government failed to prosecute people, then why not? That's what the oversight role is. We can't arrest anyone. We can issue a report, but we can investigate it where there are instances where people in the government failed to do their job.
Are you in any way, shape, or form, Mr. Chairman, fearful about the ugliness of government decisions you might find and uncover and have to present to the public?
No, that committee is wired differently than most committees in Congress, so they are always ready and willing to expose government at its worst, regardless of who's the perpetrator.
Regardless of party?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of the blameworthy individuals or institutions?
Right. I mean, and again, this goes back 6 presidential administrations. I don't know how many AGs that would be. I don't know how many FBI directors, but it's a lot. So again, going back to what you said, Jamie Dimon said, that issue those go straight to Treasury. And we spend all this money on all this Homeland Security. After September 11th, these bank violations were treated differently, and there's supposed to be coordinated effort to where agencies coordinated together if they saw crime, because what you had on September 11th, the people knew that the group had just received a huge amount of money from, I guess it was Saudi Arabia and some other countries. They also knew that they were taking airline, there were people that were concerned. The bankers people were concerned about the money. Then there were airline people that were concerned about, they were taking lessons only to take off a plane, not to land a plane. And there were just lots of other hints that other agencies knew, but they weren't coordinating together. After September 11th, they changed these suspicious activity reports to where hopefully federal agencies would know anytime there was, suspicious wires coming in from foreign countries, that they would alert as to what the bank would suspect that was.
So if I hear you correctly, Mr. Chairman, what you're saying is these financial records, once obtained by the committee, may help you piece these things together.
Yes. And I think it'll be as important a piece of evidence as anything. And most people don't think about that stuff, but that's where we went in the last big investigation we had, and it was very helpful in identifying shell companies and people involved in foreign countries and governments that were involved in wiring money. And I think if there's any of that that's taken place, which there are reports that there were prominent people in foreign countries that were, associated with Epstein somehow, we'll be able to trace the money if those bank violations were filed.
Before I let you go, where is the committee's investigation with the former administration, and what do you still want to know? What conclusions, if any, have you drawn?
What we're investigating in the previous administration is the excessive use of the auto pen, especially in the last 3 months. of the Biden administration.
Can you quantify that or explain to my audience what you mean by that?
Well,
Excessive use?
you're supposed to sign legal documents with an ink pen. I have to sign my subpoenas with an ink pen. When I first became chairman of the Oversight Committee, they said, you're going to have to fly up here and sign this subpoena because if we sign it with an auto pen, they could kick it out in court. Well, the same thing happened, we found with emails. The Merrick Garland Department of Justice was sending emails to the White House concerned about the excessive use of the auto pen on legal documents, especially those pardons. And
So you've got the emails
yes,
confirming
Yes.
Justice Department
yes,
concern.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So that's now part of the documentary record.
It's part of emails. We've made them public, and we've been bringing former Biden administration officials in for depositions to ask them about the process of the auto pen, and you know the question was Joe Biden aware of what the auto pen was being used on?
Have you reached a conclusion about that?
Well, we brought the doctor in, Dr. O'Connor, to get an idea of his mental fitness. And the first question that was asked was, Dr. O'Connor, were you ever told to lie about former President Biden's health? And he pled the Fifth Amendment. So that was not helpful to the theory that maybe Joe Biden was not aware of some of the excessive use of that auto pen. If you think about you've covered a lot of presidents, Major, when a president signs an executive order, they usually do it in front of a TV camera and they have an announcement or a press release.
Especially President Trump, but
yeah,
other
President
presidents
Trump does it, but I'm pretty sure Clinton
Yes,
did it too.
yes,
And
yes, indeed.
They would have
Not all of them, but many.
reporters, and I'm sure you were there
I
before.
was many
and
times,
They ask
Chairman.
questions and they'd love to talk about it. There's no, the president never even issued a statement about many of these press releases, especially that were done down the stretch. And we've asked a lot of different people in the Biden administration how they went about using that auto pen and what role President Biden played in it. And we've gotten a lot of conflicting answers. And then the emails throw in a whole nother twist, because one of the emails asked, is the president aware of who all y'all just pardoned? I mean, then you have Kamala Harris, the excerpt in her book said, things like, we never should have let Joe make the decision as to whether or not to seek re-election.
Do you, Mr. Chairman, believe that some of these pardons or actions taken in the last 3 months, if I heard you correctly, could have their legality questioned
I do.
and overturned?
I think that's very possible.
You do?
I do.
So there could be an undoing
There could be.
on this basis alone,
I think it's very possible
based on what the committee's learned so far.
based on what we've learned so far.
Any other outstanding questions you're trying to get answers to?
Well, did Joe know? Did Joe give the authority to use the auto pen for this executive order or for that pardon? Did Joe Biden review this particular pardon and then give the authority to use the auto pen on that particular pardon? Remember, he gave an interview with the New York Times where he admitted, in which should have been a puff piece interview. It's the only interview I know of post-presidency. And he said, well, he didn't approve all the pardons individually. He delegated that to his staff. That's not the way the pardon process works.
Well, there's one person you could ask these questions to, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Are you going to subpoena the former president?
Well, it's very difficult to get a former president in. It takes a lot of time. If that were an easy thing to do, Adam Schiff would have done it with President Trump. So we're mindful of time. Obviously, we've reached out. We've said publicly, if Kamala Harris or Joe Biden wants to tell us anything, they're more than welcome to tell us stuff. But I think we've been pretty transparent about the purpose of this investigation. And we had Corinne Jean-Pierre in last week. We got Jeff Zients in this week. And we've had several former spokespeople and deputy chiefs of staff and executive secretaries in and asked them a lot of questions. And some have pled the Fifth and some have been very helpful. So we're going to put it all together. And I think the American people can make a judgment call on what we've come up with. We'll release all the transcripts of all the depositions. And I think that this administration and the courts will probably, at the end of the day, make some type of decision if anybody challenges the legality of those pardons and executive orders that were signed down the stretch.
cautionary tale for the country about presidential power?
Well, I think that in the future, we need to be very clear on how the auto pen is used on legal documents. We all use auto pens for certificates of achievement and to respond to letters and happy birthday cards and things like that. And I think you would find if you challenge it in court, you could probably get away with using the auto pen if you were out of the country and something had to be
On
signed.
legislative matters, I've covered presidents where that's been true.
Right. But to
For
use
speed
it,
or efficiency or some other reason.
We're talking about he used the auto pen over 5,000 times on legal documents in the last 3 months of the administration when he was in the White House 75% of the time. So, and there are reports after reports of the president's mental state and cognitive state not being adequate to fulfill the duties in office. That's why we brought the doctor in. The doctor wouldn't answer any questions, which I think is very bizarre. That these weren't HIPAA violations. These were simple questions. Have you ever been told to lie about the president's health? And he pled the fifth. And I think that from what we've heard, and I think many of the books that are coming out are going to say the same thing, Joe Biden was, especially after the debate, after the poor debate performance against Donald Trump, when he eventually dropped out of the campaign, that there were a very few people in the White House that were guarding him and kept cabinet secretaries from meeting him. We've had high-level staffers that said they got to where they were only seeing him once every 6 weeks down the stretch, even though he was in the White House. So it's kind of bizarre. And then to see the emails where even the Biden Justice Cabinet was worried about.
The Justice Department.
And I felt like those emails maybe you should like try to sign them with an ink pen individually instead of doing them all by auto pen. And you know, there's some other questions they asked in the emails that aren't consistent with some of the testimony, and that'll be in the final report. But we want to wrap this up as soon as possible because, again, these congressional investigations just last too long.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.